Hi everyone, welcome to new mentor training for September 2020. A most unusual time, but thank you so much for wanting to be a mentor. You're either watching this if you're a mentor that's new to Sussex, very warm welcome to you. You'll be able to pick it up very quickly if you've mentored before, so you're watching this just to see the way that Sussex does things. Every university does things slightly differently. Or you're a brand new mentor who's totally new to this and needs to learn what the role is all about. But you're all extremely welcome. I know you're all really, really busy with all the stuff that's going on in school and the new rules and how different things are. So an even bigger welcome than usual, if that's possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to guide you through this presentation. We've decided to do it as a video because apparently it's better. It's a real leap off a cliff for me. Anyone that's out there watching who has been trained by me, and I know there's a few of you, hello to you guys, will know that I'm not great with technology. It has taken me hours and hours to get to this point. So if it is a little clunky, I sincerely apologise. I'm sat in my dining room the way that all of us have been doing our work recently. So apologies for the slightly shonky backdrop and hair because it needs a cut. So let's crack on. And I'll guide you through this session. I'm doing it differently to other sessions maybe that you've watched before at university or other places. Panopto doesn't work for this kind of presentation because I want to be able to flick through files like this, which I can't do if I use Panopto. It does make it slightly awkward afterwards to look at the slides, so I'll be uploading those onto our website too, along with the video, so you can look at the slides separately to this video presentation. Now, how to use this presentation. So this is new mentor training for this year. There'll be a part 2 in January. This is the first bit. You have to use it in conjunction with this guidebook, which is on our partnership webpage. So you must use it with that because that's where the detail is. This is just a summary really, and guiding you through some key bits and having me sort of talk through different scenarios. There are certain slides that have a little star on like this. You just read those in your own time, the statements from the DFE and things like that, and slides that I just didn't think I needed to read through. You can just pause the video and have a look at those. Now, what's important to do after this one, I don't recommend straight after, but before your subject-specific training, which will be next week, the week of September the 21st, you need to watch the generic training. Now, that takes you through what every mentor will have to look at this September, which is about our forms, our focus for the year, how we're dealing with teaching during the pandemic, just a very brief bit about that because we're trying to plough on as much as usual, and just the bits and bobs that go out with everybody else. Next week, so you're watching this the week of the 14th of September, hopefully, next week, so the week of the 21st, is your subject specific. Now that's not pre-recorded, that will be live, what universities calling synchronous, via a Zoom. So your subject specific tutor will be in touch about that and send you the details for that Zoom. Okay, so I hope that's all clear. When you've watched this, if you've got any questions at all, please do get in touch with me, and I will do my best to give you every answer that I need to. Okay, so quick introduction. My name's Branagh. I'm the new mentoring lead. This is a new position that they've invented this year, especially for this year, hopefully carrying on next year. My normal job is the lead science tutor. So I know there's a couple of people out there that I've noticed on the list who I trained recently. Very welcome to you guys. I've been at the university for about 12 years. Previously, for those of you that know the city, I used to work in a school called Falmer, which is now Backer. And before then I was up in Essex. I've been a professional tutor, I've mentored for years as a teacher, and I was an advanced skills teacher in charge of new staff training. So just to let you know that I'm not just someone that they've plucked out the uni to do this session for you. Now, objectives for today, obvious ones. We're going to go through what a mentor does. We're going to have a quick look, very quick look at the teacher standards, because that's integral to the role of the mentor, that you are assessing and observing the trainee with those standards in mind. We don't just write things like be better at behaviour. We have to be specific and link it to particularly standard 7 in that case. I'm going to guide you through the ITE year. Another reason for using Capto is I can scroll all over the slides while I talk to you, which is useful, and let you know where the hot spots are for trainees and when they might be a little bit more frantic than other times. Really important job of the mentor is to get ready for your trainee to come, to get ready for their arrival. They are nervous, they're I would say 10 times more nervous than they normally would be at this time of the year because of what's going on in the world. And our job is to make them feel welcome and supported, especially in those first few weeks. I mean, all the way through, but particularly in those first few weeks when they are at their most vulnerable. They're new to your school, and you need to make them feel welcome. Okay, I'm going to guide you through the paperwork, which is obviously really important, but it's not the most important thing about the year, so I'm not going to spend too long telling you how to fill in a form. And then we'll talk about maybe what might go wrong and what to do if that happens. So, role of the mentor. So first thing to do is maybe to think about why you want to be one. I do hope that everybody here is a willing participant in this process, that you have chosen to do it, because it can be quite a lot of work, especially to begin with. Trust me, you reap the benefits later once they teach your lessons, but to begin with it can be quite time consuming, and some trainees are needier than others, so it does need to be a choice of yours. You might do it because you had a great mentor and you want to replicate that. You might have had a mentor that wasn't very good, and you want to make sure that that doesn't happen to somebody else. That's why some people come in. You might want to improve your classroom practice by doing this. And of course, for a lot of people, it is part of career development. It's a really important part. If you want to go on and go into leadership, head of department, whatever, it's a great journey for that. So do have a think about why you want to be a mentor and the kind of mentor you want to be. Now, what can you get from it? It isn't purely altruistic. It's not. Although if you have a very difficult trainee, maybe it might feel like that at times, but genuinely you will get an awful lot out of this. When you watch other people and when you are watched, especially at the beginning, it does help you to reflect on your own practice. I know that some of the best lessons I've probably ever taught when I was a teacher are when I had a trainee. So those first lessons where they're watching me with my classes, I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to put my best foot forward. I've got to show them that I can plan, that I'm overtly demonstrating assessment, overtly showing behaviour management. So it will make you a lot better at what you do yourself, and think about how you do things. One of the really good things is articulating professional knowledge. So somebody might say to you, you've got this class, they're being really well behaved and they're doing amazing learning, and someone can say to you, how did you get them to do that? And you're like, oh, I don't know, they just seem to do it for me. They don't just magically do it for you. There's something that you do and have learned to do over years, or have a natural ability. But when you're a mentor, you have to be able to articulate that and say, I do this in order to get that response from the pupils. And it's a really important part of reflecting on our own practice to be able to talk about it. It will make you a better teacher. We also get stuff back, so it makes us better. But when we watch a new teacher who they've only got 8 hours to plan, I mean they spend an awful lot of time doing it, but they hopefully will spend time being really creative, making resources, and you can take all of that. We've got someone in front of us and, oh, that's a brilliant idea, I'm going to use that for my lesson. So we learn by observing them. As said before in the previous slide, it's great experience of managing people. Some trainees are very straightforward, some are not quite so straightforward, and we honestly, for some of them, do learn an awful lot of patience about how you deal with somebody who can be in quite a lot of stress, which is often part of being in a management role, isn't it? Is dealing with people that are in stressful circumstances. So it's very good for that, very good for learning to organise other people, being responsible for somebody else. Another real quirk that a lot of people don't think about being a mentor is when you observe your own class from the back, you suddenly see it with different eyes. You put different goggles on. And it's amazing what they've been doing that you didn't notice until you sit at the back. It's a really privileged position, sitting at the back and watching your own class. So I hope you enjoy that bit, because it's really quite enlightening. Okay, so what do you do? What's the role of a mentor? Basically, your job, we're the tutors at university and you're our other halves in school, and you guide them through their training. So you scaffold their beginnings so that they don't just get thrown in at the deep end, because that never ever works. Okay, you decide when they do starters, you decide who they go and observe, who are the best people to observe, and I'll talk a bit about that later on. You guide them through their planning. You must co-plan with them. Don't just tell them to go away and plan a lesson and come back. They won't know how to do it. It's not an innate skill. So You co-plan with them, you help them plan their lessons, you help them understand your pupils, your school, and how that works. And that's why every trainee has a genuinely unique experience, because they're with you in your school. You meet them regularly every single week. You observe them every week as well. That could be another colleague, but most of the time it is you, and you feedback on their lessons. So that's the main role. You scaffold their journey, you observe them, you meet with them. You're their critical friend all the way through their journey. You are extremely important to them, extremely important. But your job has a duality. So yes, you are their critical friend, so you're nurturing and supportive and kind and all those other words, but you also must be critical. Now, some trainees find that difficult, but it's a target. It's not a criticism to be critical, if you know what I mean, although people are probably going to say feedback is the same word. But what we mean to be, we need you to analyse their teaching and find out where they can improve. And you also have to write about them in an assessment, which I'll come on to later, where we don't just want everything in the garden is rosy, because every trainee can improve. We know we can improve in every single facet of our job, but so can they. So yes, we want positivity. Of course we do. We all need that. We all need praise. But we also need some criticality as well in the mix. So that's when the job can get a little bit difficult, especially if you're new. It's a lot easier if you're an experienced mentor. So I'm going to leave you to read that yourself. It's got a star on it. So what does the DFE think? It talks about experienced. I question sometimes whether, experience is important, but also some people are just naturally good with people. So some of you out there might not have been teaching that long, but you're going to be a brilliant mentor. So read that in your own time. Same for half of this. So these are the teachers' standards, just like the trainees have standards. Mentors have standards. Sorry, not teacher standards, mentor standards. But exactly what you'd expect. The qualities, teaching, professionalism. Again, read those in your own time. This is what our trainees say are the important parts of the mentoring role. Now, you can tell by the words, so I'm just going to quickly change that, of what they're looking for. So they want you to be there for them. Approachable comes up all the time. If they come to you and you're like, oh, I just don't have time for you, it makes them feel bad, right? Now, if they're constantly coming to you and you're having to be a bit snippy, you contact us, because they're being too needy. They're grown-ups, they need to be independent, they need to learn to be quite resilient. But you do need to be open to them, again, particularly right at the beginning. So approachable, you do need to know your stuff. If they ask you about something to do with subject knowledge or about how to do something in a lesson and you don't know, they're going to lose faith in you, just like the kids would if you teach a lesson you constantly never knew the answer. The word challenging is in there too. Really important. If all you ever say to them is, oh, that's great, they will also lose faith in you. You need to be able to say, no, I can see improvements, that needs to be better. Really difficult if your trainee is very talented, very difficult. But then we have to nitpick, and we're like, no, okay, well, that's brilliant, but I can still see that particular kid over there didn't get everything done. I want you to focus on their next lesson. You can get them to focus on EAL and whatever else in their practice would really enhance. So challenging, but with this really positive edge. It's the balance of challenge and support in equal measure is what's really important. Okay, now let's have a quick look at the standards. I'm not going to go into them in too much detail because you can read them. These aren't subsections. So where you've got standard 1, there are these bullet points underneath. They're not that they have to meet each one. They're examples, they're exemplars. Now, the new early career framework will be discussed at some point. I'm not going to go into that now because it would really complicate matters. But these are the teacher standards that they have to be judged against. They have to meet them. Now, good teaching doesn't teach to the standard. So they don't plan a lesson going, right, I've got to have high expectations, I've got to get progress. They plan awesome lessons because they care about children and they want them to do well. As a result of planning them, you go, oh, you're meeting standard 1, you do have high expectations. We tend to talk more about the standards, about you need to have high expectations if the trainee isn't doing very well. So you can go to them and go, look, standard 1 is to have high expectations. You allowed that kid at the front to talk through most of your lesson and you didn't reprimand them. That's not having high expectations. So quite often, really good teachers who understand how it works and they're working really hard and they get it will automatically sort of meet the standards, if you know what I mean, and produce evidence of them organically. Teachers that maybe are struggling a little bit, you may have to be more overt about the standards. So if they don't get their lesson plan to you 24 hours in advance, they're not meeting really any of these standards. You can't check their subject knowledge, you can't check that they've planned it appropriately, you can't check that it's adapted for the kids to meet standard 5. So do use them in your, you have to use them in your observations actually, but in your mentor meetings too, and explain to the trainee, you're really good with standard 1, I can see you really care, however, all the lessons look very similar, so you're not living up to standard 5 where you're adapting for these different pupils. Okay, so time to take you through a year in the life of a mentor. Okay, so what does the year look like? So I'm going to take you through 2 different models because most of you are mentors on the classic PGCE route with the 2 almost equal size placements. I'm just going to quickly go through that one first and I'll use this one to discuss the hot spots for the year. School direct mentors, I've got a separate one in a second where I'll talk to you about the different dynamics of that. If you're only PGCE, then obviously skip through the school direct one that's coming afterwards. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up a little pen. Now, where we are now, we are, okay, so I'm recording it here. It goes live, this video goes live here, and we want you to watch it in this week of the 14th of September and watch the generic training in there, and then subject-specific training is going on in this week there. Now, the trainees have got an elongated induction so that schools could settle into their new routines without having trainees around. So this is why we're a week later than usual. For those of you that are new, that's why people go, oh, they're coming in late. We are coming in later. We'd normally be coming in the week of around the 21st of September. Now that shortens the time between when they start with you, which is the 28th of September. So I haven't got my specs on, so I can't see. 28th of September. That is a nerve-wracking day for them, that first day in school. So what I'd like you to do is to email them in this week here. Now, hopefully we've got your details as well. And we've been able to share their emails with you. So do email them in advance. It will make a massive difference to them that you've contacted them, that you've introduced yourself. It will make them feel, it would certainly make me feel a hell of a lot more comfortable. So they arrive in on the 28th. Now, most of this week is determined by your professional tutor. And they organise an induction programme. But as the mentor, as the really important person to your trainee, you do need to check that that is happening. For whatever reason, your professional tutor might not have got a programme sorted, or more likely is your trainee doesn't know, or they haven't been able to access the information. So please do make sure that they know where they're going each day and that you've got a copy of the professional studies programme, that induction programme for the first week. They've got a list, and you've got a list in the handbook, which I'll show you in a sec when we talk about settling them in, that I'd really like you to have a look at and check that they've got keys and they've got all the kind of stuff that they need that makes them feel comfortable. Sooner you get that bit sorted, the less they are likely to mither you and hassle you for stuff. So get the stuff done there so then they can be a lot more independent and not need you to open a door, because that can start getting really irritating. Week 2, we're starting to think about them observing their timetables. So it's a good idea back here and now thinking about who can I give them what classes, and I'll talk about timetable later on, because there's rules about who you can give them and the balance. We then are in this week, maybe you start to give them some starters. Again, I'll talk about this later on. And then maybe teach a lesson before half term, maybe after. That's up to how the trainee's going. And this is bespoke, right? You're going to have a trainee that maybe is more nervous to someone else even in your department or in your school. So it doesn't have to be everybody does this, but we do have certain things that everyone has to have, like the induction is non-negotiable. Everyone has to have an induction. Now, they've got directed study. Now, that's what we would call half term. We call it directed study for them because they've got work to do. Because not only are they in school, they've got university assignments to do as well. This is a postgraduate certificate in education, which means that they've got assignments. It's at master's level. They don't just cruise through and get teaching. They have to do other stuff as well, which is why PGC is so demanding. Now, the assignment is called an APK, which I'll talk about a bit later on. And then we go through the year. They're building up to 8 hours teaching if they can. If you think that's going to put them over, we don't go to 8 hours. If they're only on 3 or 4 by here, now we've got a problem. And that little SP there is support plan. So if things aren't quite going so well, then we do a support plan. Okay, that goes in there. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Blob here, just before half term, you're going to do a little assessment on them. It's obviously just about their professionalism because you can't comment on their teaching. We'll talk about that in a sec. And we've got another assessment on them there, which is the B one. It's the second one. Now that is obviously about their teaching, whether they've managed to settle in, get some teaching done, whether they're listening to feedback. That's extremely important. Are they doing what you tell them to do? Because they won't progress unless they do. Now, Christmas, we know that's not really a rest, is it, for most of us, especially those of us with families, but they've got a literature review to write. So this is starting to get a little bit for them. They're starting to feel the pressure because not only have they got to do some study in this time and write a literature review, they've also got to get their lessons planned back for here, okay? So it's an important time for them. So a hot spot there. Another support plan there. If they've come back and they didn't get their lesson plan sorted over Christmas, or it seems like they've gone a bit backwards, January is a dark time for all of us, and particularly for trainees. They do a big dip, but I'll explain a lot about that in our next session in January and through generic sessions through the year. They cruise along, I say cruise, makes it sound good, at 8 lessons again along here. So I'm just going to take the pen off for a sec. Okay, let's bring that pen back. So they cruise along here at 8 hours. We'll be doing drafts of their assignment around then, and then they've got to ready to study. They leave you here. Okay, so the end of placement 2 is that week before February half term. And that's when, again, you'll do another assessment of them. So we've got the A happening in just before October, the B happens just before the Christmas holidays, and then the C happens just before February half term. And they leave you, okay? You then get another one, okay? So your next one starts here, and then you take them through the second placement. But I won't talk too much about that, apart from they do 12 hours teaching a week, and we build up much, much quicker. They're handing in their assignment there. We don't want anybody off sick in here. It's very suspicious. We don't want that. And then we crack all the way through another support plan. There'll be another assessment form there. And then we do the final assignment, okay, which is a bit like a Viva. Okay, so I hope that's not as clear as mud. Now I've scrawled all over it. The next slide is for School Direct. So, School Direct people, this is different to what you've just seen. So, same assessment points for your guys. Everything's pretty much exactly the same, apart from they go on a much shorter second placement. Hopefully, in fact, it's not hopefully, it has to be to a different kind of school, a contrasting school. So, I would really like you to double check that the school that your trainee is going to is a school that they will learn to see very different types of pupils, really different types of systems. If you're quite a rural school for School Direct, it really could do with being a city school, a more urban school for that second placement. If you're a school that doesn't have lots of behaviour issues, please make this other school be different. They may not necessarily get a job in your school. In fact, quite a few School Directs don't. They move on. So it's really important that they get a very different experience. Otherwise, when they become an NQT and beyond, they haven't had the kind of experience that they need. Now, very difficult for them to do loads of different new stuff in 6 weeks, but they can make a focus, maybe behaviour, assessment, something like that they really crack on. But everything else is the same. So they come back to you here, and it's the same thing. Okay, so different program. Each one has its pros and cons, but let's just make sure that that second placement is properly contrasting. Now, How do we get ready for our trainee? So, what do they need when they're in school? The most important thing, sorry, flicking through there. The most important thing is that they're made to feel welcome. What do they need when they join you? They need to feel a part of the whole school. If necessary, they could shadow you on duties. They need to go to whole school meetings. They need to know who the Senko is. They need to know everything that's going on, pretty much, okay? Parents' evenings, don't closet them from those. And they need to do open evenings. They need to do everything, okay? And they really shouldn't be making excuses for not doing it. So again, tell your tutor if they don't seem willing to jump in. You have to give them a mental meeting once a week. They have to have professional studies once a week. That's delivered by the professional tutor or delegated to someone on their behalf. They must plan, such an important word, plan and deliver their lessons. They must reflect on their lessons. That's often a weak area for trainees, that they think, oh, I've done it, I can leave it. No, they must reflect on their lessons. They have to assess. They can't avoid. I mean, I don't know what the rules are for you guys at the moment about marking books. I know some schools, they're not marking books, but they have to assess their knowledge. They have to collect something in electronically to mark. They should be exposed to mocks, but just be careful that you don't give them mocks and they don't teach year 11 and they're expected to mark someone else's mocks. That never seems very kind or fair to me. But to mark a few and be part of moderation, I think, is highly appropriate. They need to be attached to a form. They have to see what the life of a form tutor is like. An essential part of being a teacher, and personally the most enjoyable part of being a teacher. They have to improve their subject knowledge while they're with you as well, and how to teach your subject. So not just the knowledge, but the pedagogy associated with your subject. So that's what they need in school in a nutshell. But remember, they've got uni work. They have directed tasks that they get set by their tutors. They have their big written assignment, which is called Applying Professional Knowledge, and they have their second assignment, which is Reflecting on Professional Knowledge. So they have got other stuff to do, but they really shouldn't be doing their uni stuff during the day at school. So a busy trainee is a respected trainee. Nobody wants to see a trainee sitting in the staff room drinking tea and chatting. It's not good. There's always something to be doing. And if they've got time to sit in the staff room, they've got time to sit in the back of a lesson and observe. Okay, so just be mindful that they do need to be on the go as much as possible, learning all the time. Now, the guidebook, which I'll just flick up quickly for you here, is where we go to look for everything in school, right? So what your job is in school. So very quickly, I flick there to page 24, and it shows you all the different things that the trainees need when they're with you. And they've have some kind of tick list as well to go through. So you're in phase 1 right now as a mentor. So coming to the training, that's stage 1 done. Now it's time to think about their timetable. I'll come on to that in a minute, but as you're getting ready for them, do think about the timetable. What classes are you willing to release? Doesn't always work so well if you release a class that are your favourite, and that you've got a really good relationship with that class, but you might not have a choice because of limitations. You need to think about how you're going to settle them, how you're going to welcome them to the department on the first day. Whether you're going to, I don't know, bring in a packet of biscuits or something. They should bring in biscuits, to be honest. But so how are you going to help them to feel really welcome on that first day, to meet the technicians in science, introduce people in the department. It'd be really good, as I've said before, to email them before they arrive with those first day arrangements. I'm going to leave that with a star because that's covered in the handbook. So what does the trainee need for you, and what are they entitled to? So your professional tutor has signed a partnership agreement agreeing to all of these things. So they're not optional. These are the things that everything needs to happen for every trainee. So do make sure that you're aware of them as a new mentor. So first days. They need to feel that they can trust you. So warm welcome, a good smile. Let's try and fake maybe for half an hour not being really busy if we can manage that. They need to know that they can trust you. So do share some personal stuff, who you are, do you have a family, a hobby, whatever. Just let them in, let them be a part of your team. I've mentioned a bit about break time earlier. They need to know what's going on, what rooms to go to. They could really do with a tour, okay, to begin with. So the first week, the stuff that's really important to them is access to policies. So show them on the system where all the policies are. They have to be able to get a login straight away and get the school email. Otherwise, they will miss things. Show them where the schemes of work are on the system, how to take a register, because they'll need to do that as soon as possible. Obviously, the behaviour policy is extremely important. Something that really does matter to them is data, access to the data. So there's no point saying that they can't get on Sims and then you don't help them and sit next to them. Excuse me. They have to be able to get the data to teach. So please give them as much as you can within, I know, the GDPR and whatever issues that you've got within your school. They shouldn't find out 3 months down the line that there's a child there who's got a really low reading age and they've only noticed through, they can't even access their exercise book at the moment. So this knowledge is very important to them up front. So a nice warm welcome is what we're looking for. Now, timetable specifics. 50% with you if you can manage it. Now, that's always much more difficult in schools that have longer lessons, so 80-minute or 100-minute lessons. But please do as best you can. When you do place them with other colleagues, please be careful to place them with people that are going to be as nurturing as you are. Often if we get somebody who is a little bit more anxious in their classroom, it can be quite difficult for a trainee if they're expected to be too good too quickly. To begin with, all they've got to learn to do really is stand up and not fall over. We've got to be kind about how long it takes sometimes for some trainees to get good at this. It's it's an expert skill what you all do, and it's not easy. So be mindful who you put them with. Don't spread them too thin. So if they've got a timetable, and I've seen them before, where they've literally got 12 different members of staff over a fortnight. So if you think they've got 16 lessons, 16 hours a fortnight, that's exhausting. So they've got to go to each teacher to find out, what do you want me to teach in 3 days? And it really does cause them an enormous amount of anxiety, and they don't progress. So lowest amount of teachers possible, nurturing teachers, don't spread them too thin. Now, compliance, they have to have a mixture of Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. Now, that doesn't mean Year 9 is Key Stage 4, because it's not. It has to be those lower years, 7, 8s and 9s. And with Ofsted now, you've got to do Key Stage 3 in the sort of old way anyway, haven't you? But Key Stage 4, we need them to be in with Year 10. Now, Year 11 right now, I doubt any of you are going to give them to Year 11 right now, unless they're in a support role. But they must be teaching Year 10. They have to. Doesn't have to be a huge amount of their timetable. They're not taking over the whole thing probably, especially in Placement 1. They have to have it in there. They need to have a tutor group on their timetable. They need to have their meetings put on there and planned observations. Now note, in Placement 1, I quickly take you back to the programme, the scrawled on programme. They are not in uni on Fridays in Placement 1 for the whole of Placement 1. So don't timetable them for a Friday, because they're not going to be in. They also don't put a lesson on a Friday and say you set cover for that. That's not how it works. So you squeeze their 8 hours of teaching, approximately 8 hours of teaching, pro rata. Put their 8 hours of teaching into the Monday to Thursday. Now that does have issues, of course it does, but we've got our uni day on Fridays. Placement 2, there's more Fridays, so you include the Fridays in, and if for whatever reason they're not in on a Friday, they would set cover for that. The handbook shows you how to plan the timetable, apparently on page 22. Let's just check that, shall we? So apparently on page 22, designing timetables, there it is. And then there's some exemplars there on page 23. Oh, I like it when a plan comes together. Now, first mentor meeting, please make it within the first few days that they arrive with you. This is obviously not about standards. It's not about targets. It's about settling them in and making them feel comfortable. Now, I know we've got some experienced mentors within the team, and you might be in the same school as them, who are brilliant at this. They make people feel really at ease. They become friends during the year. It's a really important part of your role. So tell them about yourself. Let them know what you're interested in, what your passions are, and what what you might be a bit fearful of in this new way. But don't scare them. Another really important thing is to be positive. If your first reaction is, goodness, why are you coming into teaching? It doesn't sit very well. They are at this stage bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and full of hope. And what we don't want to do is to squish that. They're going to feel their own sense of doom in January when they're really tired and it's dark and they've had some unfortunate lessons under their belt and they haven't had enough good lessons under their belt. So to begin with, let's give them all a good boost, all right? If you're feeling a bit down yourself, and I could understand why a lot of us are, we might just have to fake it for that first meeting. Okay, so they need to tell you what their subject strengths are, and you need to be able to winkle out of them what their weaknesses are, because it's up to you as a mentor. Do you want to give them their area that is their weakness when they've got more time to work on it at the beginning? So for example, in science, we might give somebody, if they're a biologist, some physics year 7 at the beginning, if the time, if your timetable and scheme of work allows, because they've got more time to work on it. So if they're spending 10 hours planning one lesson, let's let it be out of their specialism. Or you think, right, that's your specialism, you're very busy right now, you're really nervous, I'll give you what you like first so that you can work on that. It's up to you, and it's up to your trainee how they feel about that. And each way is fine. Talk to them about how the school is run. Now, there's a lot of literature written about mentoring, which I'm not going to, guide you through in this session. I might in the next one in January, about the role of a mentor. And there's stuff, authors called Shannon and Anderson, and they talk about how we need to let them know some secrets as mentors. We're not the ones that are going to let them trip up. We're not those people. It's not sink and swim. It's not, oh, well, I had to go through that, so you've got to go through that. We need to let them know some secrets. If there are certain situations in school that you have found challenging and you avoid, I'm not going to go into too much data because I could be on the edge of giving away too much unprofessional stuff there. But if there's certain places in the staff room that maybe they shouldn't sit, or there are pockets of negativity, let them know to avoid it. Don't let them find out, guide them in the school. Be their friend in those first few days. Let them know what the kids are like. That's essential. What makes your kids tick? What are they like? Are they noisy but lovely? You get them calmed down and they're going to be great. What do your kids respond to? What kind of persona? Because the job of a teacher is to, we do what the kids need, and that's what a trainee needs to know. Going in like a big shouty sergeant major may not work in your school. Personally, don't think it works in any school. But you let them know those secret rules that only you could know. Now, really important one, outline your expectations. You expect them to be on time. What's your version of early, right? Don't leave that until they get it wrong for you to go, well, I don't like it like that. Think about what you want your rules to be and let them know. Don't be fuzzy, be affirmative, just like you would be with the kids in class. We're affirmative about our rules. We don't mince our words. We say it exactly how it is. Firm and to the point, doesn't have to be blunt and rude. They're so used to, they'll get very used to, we do it like this. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So don't worry about being too firm with them. I'd rather know what the rules were than get it wrong later on, and so would they. Okay, so after induction, so they're all settled, you're getting on really well. Let's look on the real positive. So they're all settled, you're getting on really well. They've had some incredible professional study sessions. They are ready to go. So how do we get them teaching? Now, you need to meet with them every single week. So let's get that bit out the way first. Every single week, without fail. This is not negotiable. This is part of the partnership agreement. They have to have it. Don't move it. The slot has to stay the same. If something like a parents' evening comes up and we're moving it for 1 week, don't cancel it. You must move it to another slot. This slot is essential to them. They need it desperately. They need you desperately, all right? So same time every week. It needs to be somewhere private. The staff room is not an appropriate place for these mentor meetings. It's not at all. Somewhere private, preferably in your classroom, but not while the cleaners are in at the end of the day. We do try to avoid negative language, because if we use negative language, they tend to. So we model the kind of language. So whenever we're doing a mentor meeting, let's start with the positive, and then we move on to the even better if. So, 3 stars and a wish kind of thing. And we'll talk later about trainees that find that difficult to accept politely worded targets. Our conversations should be developmental. They shouldn't be just about the mechanics of who you're teaching next time. It's not just, well, year 7, you're going to do this lesson and that lesson. It's about how they are developing. Those conversations should take place another time. They're not for the mentor meetings. You should outline the focus for the each mentor meeting, and they should be writing that in a tracker document that I'm going to show you now. So you don't need to take minutes in the mentor meeting unless you want to, that's up to you, but they record them in something that looks like this. Now, they'll have a tracker. You don't need to see all of the tracker bits. There's only certain bits of the tracker that you need to see. This bit is a section that they share with us, and it is sometimes really quite personal. So that's why they don't universally share it with everybody, because they want to be able to talk to their tutor in quite a personal and private manner. So they let us know what kind of week they've had. They let us know this person's talked about a magic moment that's happened. And then they record what the agenda for the mentor meeting was, and then what happened, what the notes were. And they do that every single week. We will let you know if they're not doing it, and we'll ask you if there's been a bit of a problem with organisation. This is our window into their world. So this is how they record what they're doing with you, basically, in those meetings. Okay, sorry, I'm going to move on to this now. So how to get them teaching. They've had induction, they've met with you, it's all going really well. Now, we need to do tiny steps. We don't chuck them in and go, oh, let's see how a whole lesson goes. Enough of us on the tutor team have seen that happen, and I trust me, it's always a disaster. Always, always, always a disaster. They need to observe first. If any of them think they don't need to observe, they really are wrong. We absolutely they have to watch you teach and you model good teaching. Let them discuss it with you afterwards. They should always say thank you, and they should always be really positive. They are not to give you a critique. So if any of them do that either, let us know. Once they've done enough observation and you can see that they're really twitching, act as a TA. Now, obviously, we don't know what that can look like in your classroom right now. It may not be possible, okay? So they might then have to leap observation straight to starter or plenary. What they can also do, if you don't think they're quite ready to stand up at the front and do a starter or plenary, or they don't think they're ready, they can design resources for you. All right, get them doing some tech stuff for you. They can make a Kahoot for you. They can make a quiz. Don't let them just sit there doing nothing when they've absorbed enough observation, although you can never absorb enough. We want them to observe every single week, but I'm talking about just right at the beginning. So they're ready, they've done a bit of a starter, they've got used to standing up with their adrenaline pumping, their fight flight in order. You think, no, actually that went really well. Give them a bit of feedback on it so they can file it away. Then they're ready to start teaching. So this is probably the week before half term. If they've done really well and they're not too nervous and you're not too nervous about them taking over, or I'm not even going to talk about lockdowns, let's leave that. So when they start teaching, every single lesson, emphasise this, every single lesson must have a lesson plan. It is not okay for them to turn up and teach a lesson without it being planned. It is not okay to send it half an hour before. They are not allowed to teach. Our children deserve so much better than that, okay? And so do you as their mentor. So it's a bar on teaching. It's like, sorry, you can't teach this lesson. I will now have to take over. You are never going to do that again. That's an instant email to their tutor if that happens. I once had a trainee who arrived with a napkin. Literally, I've got one here, a napkin like this. And they'd scribbled the lesson plan, it wasn't a lesson plan, on this stained napkin on the train on the way in the morning. I mean, first of all, I burst out laughing because I thought it was some kind of joke. And then I realised they were being deadly serious. So they were not allowed to teach. In fact, I banned them from teaching for about 3 days until I could see a progression in their planning and it got better. I was no way that she was going to stand up in front of my kids like that. Absolutely no way. Now, 24 hours is the sort of maximum minimum, whichever way around we look at it. They cannot do it 23. That's not okay. 72 is too long. It's too long. They could have taught another 2 lessons within that 72 and all their plans have changed. So 48 we can live with, okay, and 24 we can live with. Now you have to articulate to your trainee whether that means that you are allowing them to send them at the weekend or whether you want them on a Thursday for Monday. So be super clear in your expectations how you want it and when they have to produce those plans. Don't leave it till later to kind of tell them off. Make it super clear. Now you have to check their plan, especially in the first term. You have to check their plan for some subjects like DT or for us in science, they might be dangerous. So you've got to check to see if they're not dangerous. And you've got to see if it's wildly off. What we don't want you to do is to go in and replan that lesson. Because if you do that, when you're giving feedback, you're not really feeding back on their lesson, you're feeding back on your lesson. So only intervene if you think, you know, that's going to be an absolute disaster. So if they put a poster task in for 3 minutes, yeah, tell them that's crazy. That's not going to work. If they've put a question and answer session for 30 minutes that's verbal, go, oh, you know what, that's not going to work. If they've got 20 minutes of PowerPoint presentation, stop them doing that, because that's nonsense. However, tweaking and fiddling and doing too much to it is going to make them feel that it's not their lesson, and then they're not going to know if the feedback is genuinely for them. And we only learn by making mistakes. We only do. If you got everything right the first time, you wouldn't learn a thing. Now, that first phase is co-planning, where you sit together and decide what you're going to do, and then they produce the plan and send it to you. They don't just plan in isolation to begin with. Please give them some guidance. Please take them through the process, how you word objectives in your school. I hope it's Bloom's taxonomy, and there's smart words like explain and describe, rather than words that, you know, really can't be measured. So co-planning is important, guiding them through is important, okay? But once they get going, don't tweak them so much that they then don't know whether they're coming or going, okay? Observing your trainee. Again, there's more in the guidebook. I'm just going to talk about it here. Privacy, right, as well. Have I put that on there? It should be on there. Oh no, not for observing, silly me. So when you're observing your trainee, you decide the focus. To begin with, it might just be very general. I'm just going to see if you can get the pupils to respond to you. You can get them to do something. You know, it's very general to begin with. So establish the focus, and that needs to be made clear to them. You need to establish the rules. Are you at the back of the class? Are you at the side of the class? Are you acting as a teaching assistant? Again, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that right now, but let those rules be known, because if you are acting as a TA, they need to write that into their plan about what they want you to do. You should write, and particularly now, copious notes about their lesson. We don't know if we're going to end up in the same situation that we were last year, where we go in a local lockdown, and then the trainees are not being observed doing the online learning. Every lesson right now matters when they start teaching. So if you write really scant notes, or they're not smart, they really won't have much evidence at the end of the year. And we will have an end of the year. We have to train them. So please don't write tiny little observation sheets. Write full, detailed, verbose observations for this year. So preferably typed, but don't worry if they're handwritten. I always used to just hand over handwritten notes when I was a mentor, because I'm so old. Back then we didn't have laptops. There's no need to edit them or tidy it up. When I observe the trainees, I tappity tap and I send it when I get back. I don't edit, because if I edit, I might then think, oh, that's a bit blunt, but it probably needed to be a bit blunt, or oh, that's a bit too positive, but it was the way I was feeling in the moment. So send it as it is. Send it as it is, okay? You do need to link the observations to the standards, okay? They have to be linked to the standards, and I've got some examples for you in a second. Right, so let's have a look at one of the observation forms. Now, you can find these on our website, which I'll put the link at the end. But Sussex.ac education, if you just put in ITE in the little search thing, they come up, all right? So we've got our professional practice profiles, which I'll talk about in a sec. Now, lesson planning for each one are on there, and then it's not on here. Ah, no, there it is. Okay, so I'm just going to open that and show you like this. Okay. So this is what the lesson observation form looks like. There's blur information at the top. We do have to comment on their subject knowledge, and then link that probably to standard 3 for its subject knowledge, although it might be that there's a particular pedagogic approach that matches one of the other standards that you might want to put in there for that. And then we then write about how well the lesson has gone in as much detail as possible, not bullet points, We need to tell them exactly what they've done right. And there's a trick to this about being specific. I liked the way you got the kids in. I liked the way that you did this. So that they don't know, so that they do know what to keep the same. Just as important as acting on targets is knowing what not to change. So I like the way you did that, keep it like that. I like the way you got them in, keep it like that. I like your seating plan, keep it like that. Okay, so put all that in the progress and strengths. We must write 3 targets. Again, be specific. Don't be worried about offending. This isn't about offending. It's about being as clear as possible so that they can act on it as soon as possible. When we write ambiguous, fluffy, fuzzy targets and strengths, they go away thinking, I don't really know how to improve. And their journey to become a better teacher will take longer. Okay, so the next bit of the form, you comment on their progress compared to the last time you observed them. If this is the first time you've observed them, you're probably just going to write something nice in there. We've got a tick box. So are they making progress? Kinda. They did some of it, or no. Now, again, don't beat around the bush with this. If you later on, and this is why you need to be careful about being honest, when we're too positive, and I mean that, you can be super positive in your language with the strengths. When we avoid targets and we avoid saying how it is, we come unstuck later on. So later on in the term, you might want to put them on a support plan. And it's going to be tricky if every single one of your observations has a cross in that box. Because the trainee will say, well, hang on a minute, you told me that everything I was doing was right. You never told me it was even in part. That's why honesty is the best policy. If you don't think they've made any progress, tell them. This is a significant motivator to get your trainees to improve themselves and act on the targets. But you have to make sure that you're writing targets that they can actually act on. So I'll give you some examples in a sec. So I'll just show you again. There's all the professional practice profiles that we're going to talk about in a second. So observing, we've talked about, showed you the form. We talked about how to do the feedback. So make sure, again, just like the mental meetings, you're in a nice private space so that, because especially if they've had a bit of a bad lesson, you don't want everybody to hear. That's not nice. This is really important. Ask them what they thought of first. And that's why it's best if it doesn't happen straight after the lesson. Sometimes you can't help it. You're running off. When we come to visit, we always do it straight after, so we don't practice what we preach there at all. I know that some colleagues do. They do it afterwards, but we're always dashing around everywhere. So it's good for them to have time to reflect on the lesson and fill in the back of the lesson plan form. So on the lesson plan, I'll just put up a business one here. It's the top one. I'll drag that up for you. On the lesson plan, there's a space at the end for reflection that all the trainees have to fill in. Now, you really shouldn't feed back on their lesson until they've filled that in. Otherwise, all they end up doing is going, I don't know, what do you think about my lesson? They must be able to see what they've done. Now, to begin with, that's really hard. After the first lesson, they don't remember what's happened. I don't remember my first lesson properly. I just wanted to run away. So they probably won't know. There's so much adrenaline, there's so much cortisol going through their system that they might not remember what exactly has happened. And you might have to nudge them along. But once they get going, they must reflect before you feedback. Okay, it's really important. And then you can ask them, well, what did you write? What did you think? If they're totally off base, that is an issue. But again, it's a skill that they will learn as they go on, okay? Now, following the lesson observation and your feedback, they go back to their tracker, just like they did for the mentor meeting, and they fill it in. And they write their the targets and the strengths that you gave them into their tracker document. I've got a few examples for you here to have a look at in your own time. That hopefully are specific. I mean, if you can find critique in them, if you can criticise them, even better. Just, make yours even better. So there's some examples of feedback. Look, they've put the standards down the side. We've got multiple standards in some of them. That is appropriate. That's okay. And then some examples of some targets. these are worded. So when you look at the bit on the lesson observation form that you fill in, it's identify the target, but the most important thing is how are they going to do it. So specific things that they need to do. That's why this needs to be really quite long. What do you need to do? This could be bullet points, okay? Because it's go and observe that class and see how that teacher uses the behaviour management policy. So just tell them this is a to-do list. This is a or to-do list or a to-don't list, okay? So whatever you need to do, make it really clear, really, really clear, okay? Now your tutors will be tracking the tracker, okay? So that's what we do. We track the tracker and we look to see how effective your feedback is, and we will be in touch with you in a nice way if we think that they could be a little bit more specific or if they're just too short. So for example, down here we've got a target there but only one. I don't think in January a trainee only had one target. I think they're far more likely to have these three, okay? So even if your trainee's having a little bit of a wobble, do try and make sure that you're giving them appropriate targets every single lesson. So assessment. There will be another session on this, so you need to look at the generic training, which will guide you through the PPPA, which is their first assessment point, but I'm just going to guide you through a bit here so that you know what to look for. So there's 5 assessment points, A, B, C, D and E, like I showed you on the year planner. The first one obviously is not about teaching, it's in October, all right, before October half term. This is about professionalism and willingness. So if they're not listening well, we get that on there. So again, don't beat around the bush. We've got a very experienced mentor who I work with all the time. She's wonderful in a local Brighton school. And one of my trainees last year didn't make a great start. And there were a couple of bits and bobs that were a little bit inappropriate. It was all a bit too casual. And to help him get on the right track, she wrote in the PPPA that things needed to be changed. Instantly changed. Once it's in print and the tutor's seeing it and they've got it, nobody wants that. So do say how things are going. You know, if things are brilliant, say it. But if things aren't quite right and you've got some concerns, say that too. Slight change there. So PPPB to PPPD are developmental. So B, Christmas, C, February, D, before Easter. The final one is a summary of their journey and development. So do be sure that that one really sets them up for being an NQT. But we will guide you through all of these throughout the year. All we're worrying about right now is PPPA, okay? Now, before each assessment point, so before you fill in the PPPA, you have what's called an end of phase meeting where you chat with them, you talk through the evidence that they've gathered. But again, I'm going to talk about that more in generic, so I won't talk too much about that now. These are what the forms look like. So you fill in, the trainee fills in most of it, but then you obviously have to tick that they passed that professional practice and that they're doing all right. This bit is what the trainee fills in. They have to do it based on evidence. Obviously, for the first one, for PPPA. So this is the one that the trainees fill in. Sorry, flicking through there. The trainees fill in based on whatever they've got in their tracker. And then you have a look at that. So that's the bit of the tracker that you can see where they've talked about their evidence and where they've gathered different bits and bobs throughout the term. Obviously, not much in this first one. And then the final page of the PPPA is where you write your feedback and you say how they're doing. It then goes to the professional tutor and then they sign it off and say pass or fail. Trainee has to see the final version, and then you will sign it and then the professional tutor signs it. And then it gets sent to that little email address down there, IT@Sussex, and that needs to come from the professional tutor. So you do your bit and forward it on, okay? Now, this is for in your own time. Names have been changed for anonymity. So there's some nice detailed examples of feedback on the A form. It's a little bit different when we get to the B form, okay? So that's PPPA dealt with. So how to work with us. Now, we're on the end of an email pretty much 24/7. That's our job. That's what we do, okay? It's a good idea to work really closely with your curriculum tutor. So I said, I'm science, so I work really closely with the science mentors. you are able to email us about anything, absolutely anything, and you should expect a quick reply, okay? If you're not getting quick replies, then do let myself or Claire Stenning, who's in charge of partnership, know, because that's a really important way of us dealing with this year, especially this year, every year, but especially this year. We also know, especially for you that are your new mentors, what normal looks like. So you might think that a trainee should be better before they're able to be. You might think they should be better at assessment before they're able to do that. Assessment's really tricky. They find that really difficult. And we can say, oh no, that's perfectly normal for this stage of development. Or the opposite, where somebody's very reluctant to teach at the beginning of November. You're like, no, they have to teach at the beginning of November. And we can tell you, no, that's not normal. There's obviously something going on. So the slightest thing, honestly, that first week, if they're not on time to stuff, you send us an email. We want to know. We do want to know. Now, it can sometimes feel for some trainees and mentors like, oh, don't let the union know that. We don't want you to get in trouble. That's not appropriate, okay? They're not going to get in trouble. The most important thing is getting them through as the best teacher they can be. And we only can do that if we work together. So do let us know everything, okay? And if you're not sure about anything. We do our best to match our trainees to a school we think is the best match for them. At Sussex, we match our own. It's not done by a partnership office. We do it ourselves based on our knowledge of your school. Obviously, we don't know you very well because you're new, but it's more to do with the trainee that we've met and we placed them. Now, this year, we had to decide the placements back in July, which is not what we normally do. We normally meet them and then we get to know them and then we place them. But we decided them back in July so that your school would know that you definitely had somebody coming. So if there are any teething troubles, do let us know. I still hope we've got it right. So email us and early alerts, okay? That's what we're looking for. We never feel like we're being bothered, ever. We love emails from mentors, okay? So, other considerations. So what can be tricky? We are dealing with adults, not children. Telling an adult to sort telling a child or a pupil to sort their uniform out is relatively easy. We're used to it. That's the job, all right? Giving a kid a detention because they're late, easy, right? Telling an adult who's got their own viewpoint on the world, particularly career changes, it can be really challenging for us sometimes to deal with career changes that have their own patterns of working. We've almost got to unpick those. So attendance and punctuality, we don't mess around. We tell them they need to be early and they need to stay as late as they can, whatever the rules are for your school. The dress code they're unique to schools. Some schools it suits, some schools it's not. They should arrive very smart on the first day because you can never make a wrong impression if you're too smart. And then you can tell them whether they need to ease off or they can show their tattoos or whatever piercings they're allowed. You know, these are unique to school. So you let them know, preferably in that email the week before, how to dress. We will have discussed dress code with them. So we'd have told them not to have anything too low, nothing too short, that we're dealing with adolescence and we need to dress appropriately. So if they arrive not dressed appropriately, we have to know. We have to know, or you fix it really quickly and then maybe we don't need to know. It can be an issue of attitude to workload. Some come in and say, oh, I didn't realise it'd be such hard work. I'm always a bit confused about that because surely everybody knows that this is hard work. And it's not, it's in the news how hard teachers work and how dedicated teachers have to be. We don't want them moaning about the excess work. You work extremely hard. That is the job. That's what we do. Our work becomes part of our life. And if they are truly dedicated to what we do, I hope that it's not seen as work. It should, a lot of it, be really rewarding. So that can be an issue. So again, let us know if you think they're a little bit work shy or a bit shoddy and disorganised, because they just end up wasting time if that's the case. Unprofessional language, we want to know about that straight away. Not often, that's not fair. Sometimes we get trainees that gaff at the beginning. It's always at the beginning when they're nervous and they say inappropriate words. What we don't need to do is press a giant alarm bell if somebody accidentally lets slip a more adult word that we wouldn't want in front of the pupils. But they do need to be told about it and told that it's not okay. Okay, so once they start teaching, other issues can be being overly needy. So needing everything checked through with a fine tooth comb. They want absolutes about, do you think this will work? And you'll be, I don't know. You got to try it. You got to get on with it. That they need too much validation, that they constantly need to have their ego stroked. It's not good. That can be really tricky. And that's when you might need to set up some boundaries, that they're allowed to talk to you at this time of the day, or they need to keep it for the mentor meeting. Don't let them constantly be your shadow if you find that suffocating. If you're all right with that, then go ahead. But for a lot of people, they probably find that quite suffocating. We talked about workload. Unwilling to cope with the workload is a big no-no. Absolute no-no. This next one, let's just highlight that. Finding it hard to take your advice or thinking they might know better. I think that's one of the hardest things we have to deal with as a mentor, where you've got somebody that like, no, I'm not going to do it your way. I prefer to do it this way. We get it in the job of a tutor all the time, that somebody thinks that they know better. It never ends very well, I'm going to be honest. Their job is to come in and listen to the experience. They are all novices. Doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter what career they've had before, doesn't matter if they've worked in banking before, they might have been great at banking, but they're now a novice teacher, and there is a huge amount to learn, and they must take on your advice and feedback. And it's a massive red flag if they're choosing not to do that because they think they know better. So again, contact the tutor and we'll guide you through that. And it could be that someone needs to go on a support plan for that kind of stuff, okay? If they're not filling in the back of their lesson plan and reflecting, that's another tricky thing. They have to do that. You could say, I'm not feeding back on your lesson. We won't be having our mentor meeting until you filled that in. So they have to do their end of the bargain. In the handbook, there's a page, and I haven't called it role, it's responsibility of a trainee. What do they have to do? They've got a lot to do. You've got lots to do, but they have to hold their end, all right? Some trainees find feedback very difficult and they're too defensive. So what we can do is focus very much on the positive. Some of them find it difficult to take positive too. That can be really annoying, right? So it's like they won't take that they did something well. You're like, well, you did. And we almost have to sit back and think, no, well, you did do that well. I give that to you. And then this is what we need to work on. Keeping up with paperwork, not getting their plans early enough. Like I said, they just don't get to teach. And if you don't get to teach, you won't get qualified teacher status. Don't give them the benefit of the doubt with that one. That one is a non-negotiable. No plan, no teach. Okay, it has to be like that. Another bit can be they don't do any marking. You tell them to do some marking, and you say that this is part of Standard 6. It's part of knowing how we adapt our lessons for different people's. Again, as a non-negotiable. So let us know. So there's all those things that we need to be mindful of. But get in touch with your tutor if you're not sure. So what happens if it doesn't go to plan? Okay, so some trainees are not so good at taking feedback. What to do? Contact us immediately. Remind the trainees that it's not criticism. Be as positive as you can, but not falsely positive. Now, if a lesson observation didn't go too well, you don't have to... So say it's an anomaly and they're normally a really good trainee and they have a doozy, right? You could decide that that's not their formal observation for the week and do another one, okay? That would be the kind thing to do. So just say, look, don't worry. That was a complete mess. You know, everybody was late from PE or they were late from assembly or whatever it is, and it threw them and you're like, oh, don't worry, we'll do it another time, okay? So we can bend the rules as well to make things better for them. Okay, so last slide. What next? So you've completed this session. Now, obviously, I couldn't go through everything about being a new mentor. And as I'm new to this, I hope I've covered enough. I really do hope I've covered enough. I hope I didn't ramble on too much. Apologies if I did. So you've completed this training. Thank you so much for listening. I do hope that we see each other soon. Now, the next training that you need to look at is the generic mentor training. So this has been about the vibe of a mentor, what it's like to be a mentor, guiding you through those beginning bits. Please read the handbook. There's a lot more detail in the handbook. I've written the handbook. So it's taken it step by step by step. So it's essential that you read the handbook. This session is in addition to the handbook, basically. So go through that. The generic training is going to guide us through what this time of year is like. and how we fill in that form, or just guiding you through the form, because let's be honest, we can all fill in a form, you can all put boxes. Do read the ones with stars so that you've got a bit more detail. And if you've got any questions at all, please contact me. So my name's Fee Branagh, and there's my email at Sussex. So thank you ever so much. Apologies in advance if I'm not able to go back and do some of the little editing bits that I need to do, and some of it's a bit scrappy. Yeah, I apologise for that. Okay, but anyway, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And maybe one day we'll all be face to face again. Thanks ever so much. Bye bye.